Okay. So once again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Daniel Aaron Price. I am National PTAs' Family and Community Engagement Manager. So I just have a few housekeeping details to get to before we get started. So first, we'd love you to introduce yourself. So please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, your city or state, and or what organization you represent, if that is applicable. Be sure to select panelists and attendees or everybody so we know all who is here. All attendees today are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box. We will dedicate the last 10 to 15 minutes to responding to those questions that you post and field some of your questions to our panelists as well. The first hour of our webinar will be a moderated conversation with our featured speakers, and the last 30 minutes will be for attendees to engage in guided breakout room conversations about the webinar topic. So we highly encourage you to stay for our discussion with your colleagues at the end. This webinar, again, is being recorded, and a link to the recording, including all resources that you see shared as links in the chat, will also be compiled and shared in a follow-up email to all webinar registrants. I'd like to also remind everyone that this is the first webinar in the continuation of our Transforming Family School Partnerships series. We're thrilled that this series continues to be well received and are grateful to all of you for taking time out of your busy days to learn more about how you can strengthen your respective family engagement practices. So this year's season, we'll be hosting 2 more webinars throughout the next few months with different panels and even more conversation. I'll be sure to add a link in the chat box now so that you can get some more information about those future webinars, and then also hopefully encourage others to register. So now I'd like to introduce Helen Westmoreland, the Director of Family Engagement at National PTA. Helen leads the association in managing our Center for Family Engagement to provide us with some framing for this webinar. So Helen, take it away.
Thank you, Daniel, so much. It's wonderful to be here with you and everyone today. I'm just so grateful to have the opportunity to get to chat with you all and hear this really fantastic conversation. So here at National PTA, our mission is to engage and empower families and communities to advocate for all children. For those of you who don't know about PTA, we're an organization of nearly 3 million members working together to make every child's potential a reality. Now, we are very excited for today's conversation in our Transforming Family School Partnerships with PTA's National Standards webinar series. We could not do this without the incredible partners at the Institute for Educational Leadership. They themselves run the Coalition for Community Schools, as well as the District Leaders Network for Family Engagement. You will get a chance to hear from the illustrious Kwesi Rollins at the close of today's panel to lead us in some reflection. He and Liz Thacker have just been great partners pulling this together, and we're thrilled to be able to do it again for the 3rd year. So we're all here today because we know family engagement matters. We know it matters for providing every child a high quality education. And based on decades of research, we also know that teachers and schools do better off when they invest in engaging families, and that students whose parents are engaged are more successful in school and in life. But we also know from lots of surveys that have been done over the years, as well as probably each of our own unique perspectives on this work, that many schools and PTAs are really looking for more impactful ideas about how to engage families. And the how is why over 20 years ago, National PTA created the National Standards for Family School Partnerships, which have served as the foundation for this webinar series. These PTA national standards set the bar for how we should all work together to support student success. Also, as part of helping support our schools and PTAs in the how, National PTA is pleased that in this past year, we launched Family Engagement Solutions, which is a free online resource to help you find and vet family engagement programs that have proven impacts on student learning and well-being. And you'll get to hear from one of those programs in just a little bit. So this year's continuation of our Transforming Family School Partnership webinar series is going to dive into some specific topics related to family engagement. by strengthening them through the national standards for family school partnerships and evidence-based family engagement programs. In addition to a great panel, as Daniel mentioned, this year we're also including breakout room discussions at the end of the webinar for everyone, so we hope you'll stick around to join us for those. Today's session is going to highlight the important benefits and strategies of fostering partnerships that help schools develop and use better family engagement habits and tools that can be sustained over time. As schools and PTAs, we can feel pressured due to limited budgets, limited time, and also, quite frankly, a natural tendency to self-reliance to build all of the how ourselves. And so part of today's conversation is to help all of us see outside ourselves, to find partners that we can turn to for expertise, for evidence, for capacity to improve outcomes for our families and schools. So I am very excited to hear about the incredible work of our panelists and their respective organizations in this space. And I'm also very pleased to introduce today's moderator. Dr. Steve Sheldon is an associate professor at the Johns Hopkins University School of Education and a co-director of the Center for School, Family, and Community Partnerships. His research focuses on the predictors and impact of family engagement in children's education, with a focus on the role of schools and teacher outreach to families. And on a personal note, I have had the pleasure of knowing Steve for many, many, many years. He's been a real pioneer in this work, and we are just so thrilled to have him join us here today and share some of his expertise. So, Steve, thanks for coming.
My pleasure. Oh, it's my pleasure and an honor. Thank you for inviting me. I am excited because I get to introduce our fantastic speakers today. And so let me start with Derek Anderson. He is the Executive Director of Community Schools at the Maryland Department of Education. I've had the pleasure of, he may not remember, but about a year ago, I met you and spoke community schools with you. So it's wonderful being able to share some space and time with you again, Derek. And so he leads districts and school level implementation of effective community schools throughout Maryland. I also am pleased to introduce Penny Christian, who proudly serves and is the current chair of the National PTA Family Engagement Committee. She was recently elected to serve as the Fayette County School on the Fayette County School Board. Penny serves as a current member of the Pritchard Committee for Academic Excellence, which has a long-standing track record of doing wonderful work around family engagement and family advocacy. And she helps train districts and school administrators around the nation around evidence-based family engagement programs. So you'll be able to get some great insights from Penny. And then finally, we have Vidya Sundaram, who is a CEO and co-founder of the Family Engagement Labs. It's a national nonprofit that advances research-based efforts to improve, literacy and math achievement for underserved students who are experiencing poverty, students of color, and multilingual learners. Vidya has 20 years of experience in the career of family engagement. She has managed the development, research, and strategy of digital resources used by more than half of U.S. families with school-aged children. So to say that's an impressive bio, I think is an understatement, quite an accomplishment. Anyways, so let me start off today's webinar with a discussion. And I'd like to start by just establishing a foundation for us all so that we know that we're coming from a common place and a common understanding. And so I'd like to start by thinking about the term and talking about the term collaborative partnerships. And I would like to ask each of our presenters to talk about how you understand and how you make meaning of the word collaborative partnerships. If I can, I'd like to start with Derek. And so let's start with just a brief introduction. If each of you can start with a brief introduction or add something to what I offered. And Thank you so much for joining us today, Derek. So let me turn it over to you. As the Executive Director of Community Schools, you have the challenge of strengthening partnerships between families, communities, and schools in order to promote positive, equitable outcomes for all of our students. Can you talk a little bit about the leadership strategies that you found to be most effective when you're fostering the culture of collaboration between schools, families, and community partners?
Yes, and thank you for the question, Dr. Shelton. I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this panel and speak on such an important topic. I would suggest that in my experience, authentic collaboration or authentic collaborative partnerships are really built on a number of things, including trust, like a shared vision, shared goals, as well ultimately a deep commitment to the success of young people. So it's important to understand that partnership is not just bringing people together, but really about fostering those relationships where every partner has a meaningful role and voice in their seat at the table. So within the agency at the Department of Education here in Maryland, I think it's important to lift up, we really embrace and promote what's known as the Community Schools Forward Framework, which in many ways, there's a lot of overlap with the national standards that we just looked at for our national PTA. But I share that to suggest that there are 6 practices within that framework of implementing the community school strategy. One of them I want to lift up for the purposes of our discussion today is that of collaborative leadership, shared power, and voice. This is certainly something, a community school is really a place that's more than just a place for learning, but meant to be a hub for the community where both students and families can access support and resources both during the school day as well as beyond. I would say in my experience, we see the most effective partnerships when schools, families, and community partners align their strengths. So, there's a saying that goes, if you've seen one community school, you've seen one community school. And that's because the implementation of the community school strategy really is meant to meet the needs of that particular community. It's not a program. It's not, a cookie cutter approach to school. It's really meant to transform the school to meet the needs of the community and align with the strengths within that community. So this hub, when we think about community schools, is really created through partnerships with families as well as community partners. And partnerships really means going beyond a transactional relationship, but a partnership is more than just donating resources, for example. We really strive for and encourage transformational partnerships where, solutions are co-designed and there's a real authentic practice of shared decision making and ultimately holding each other accountable. Again, with that shared goal of seeing young people thrive. That is what our partnership is built on. So instead of operating in silos, we really look to work together in systems so that we can ensure the success of our students and our families, and that the services and supports that are needed are really embedded to the culture of the school, not necessarily an add-on, but really embedded in the everyday of how the school functions and how most important is authentic collaboration with our parents. Families and caregivers are the experts in the needs of their children. So we want to honor their perspective and really engage them in meaningful ways so that we can create more inclusive and responsive schools to meet the needs of all of our young people. Ultimately, real partnerships is about or are about reciprocity. And it's about ensuring that we're not just saying, what can you do for us? But, how can we uplift each other in the service of our students? So when this approach is taken, whether it's community schools or other public schools throughout the state of Maryland and beyond, that collaboration or that collaborative mindset is what's important as we create lasting change that will benefit our students, our schools, and our broader communities.
Thank you, Derek. I appreciate that fantastic response and thoughtful response. So I'd like to turn Penny to you. I think this is a great opportunity for you to jump in. So in addition to your thoughts about collaborative partnership, can you just share a little bit of perspective and take some time with us to talk about as a PTA leader, as a national trainer of districts and school administrators, why do you feel it's important for schools to partner with the PTAs in the evidence-based program? So again, start with the idea of collaborative partnerships, and then I'd love to hear about how that trails into your own work as a trainer and a leader, and in the value of PTA more generally speaking.
Thank you, Dr. Sheldon. So first of all, let me say, when the question is, what do collaborative partnerships look like? Helen has already given us the mission, so I won't recite the mission again. But what I will say is, along with the National PTA mission, we also have 5 values. And the first value is collaboration. Right? So it's where we commit to work in partnership with a wide array of individuals and organizations to broaden and enhance our ability to serve and advocate for all children and families. So what does it look like? It looks like empathy. It looks like PTA flexibility, and sometimes it looks even like vulnerability, right? And I think that that's where we begin. So that's what collaboration looks like in the PTA world, in terms of finding someone who's willing to listen, and those who are already willing to listen, putting them in a position to where they want to just share everything that we've done, everything that PTA is, and understanding that we cannot do this in silos, right? It cannot be siloed work. And that's where I think collaboration, I love their explanation. I love the value that we have. It's the first thing that we think of. And do you want me to answer that question, or do you want me to let Vidya give her definition of collaboration first?
Actually, why don't we jump over to Vidya really quickly? I'll let you have a moment to spotlight your ideas around collaborative partnerships. And then Kenny, I promise I will come back to you to return.
I am going nowhere.
You're going amazing places, don't you worry.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sheldon, and just appreciative of the work of the National PTA and IAL for including work of Family Engagement Lab in this conversation. Family Engagement Lab is a national nonprofit that's working to catalyze equitable family engagement and student learning by bridging classroom curriculum and at-home learning. And our work focuses on the partnerships between teachers and historically underserved families by facilitating ongoing communication and collaboration about learning. And so to that question about authentic collaboration, for us, what that looks like in this context is educators meeting families where they are, working across linguistic and cultural differences, and flexibly adapting to diverse needs. It also looks like families having an understanding of what their students, what their child's learning goals are, and where their child is with respect to those key academic benchmarks throughout the year, and ongoing support for their child achieving those benchmarks. Educators, in turn, are sharing relevant, research-based, and actionable information weekly with families to support at-home learning. And this information is based on what students need and helps the parents build knowledge, skills in their child at home. And together, families and educators' roles and responsibilities are clear. Like, each are valuing the other's contributions and recognizing the importance of collaboration to promote student success in learning. And so for that day-to-day manifestation of this more strength asset-based approach, supported by training and tools for educators and families, and these efforts manifesting as building families' confidence and capacity to actively support learning. What you might see, in a parent is like a dad of a kindergartner learning at that right time that his daughter will not only learn how to count to 10, but she's also learning that when she's counting things, the last number that she says is the total of what she has. And so then that dad is helping her practice by playing counting games with her when she's eating snacks, not just because he knows the practice is going to help his daughter, but because there's no greater joy for a parent or a caregiver than to see their child grow and thrive.
Thank you. I think that's so true, that as parents, we all want to see our kids thrive and succeed and do well. And it's really energizing. So Penny, if I could circle back to you, I want to make sure that you had an opportunity to finish your whole thought, and particularly the thoughts around PTA and the importance of partnering with the PTA in order to bring about these collaborative partnerships. I know you talked a little bit about it, but I wanted to make sure you had a time to fully expand and elaborate on that.
Absolutely. Thanks. So I will say that partnering with PTA, because you get the question all the time, right, about why PTA, especially at the district level when you're trying to figure out how to partner with superintendents or school boards or whoever. And I will say that partnering with PTA is a natural segue to effective family engagement, right? This association can't do what it does without engaging families. And we can't be as successful as we are. And we are not the largest and the oldest child advocacy association in the country without having that type of family engagement. So when we talk about this notion with school districts and superintendents, we make the case. How do we make the case? We make the case anecdotally. We make the case with the knowledge of everything that National PTA has already done. And also understanding that while PTA is a great segue, it's not the only route that you can get. So how do we get, excuse me, how do we get our superintendents and our school boards and our districts to understand and embrace this? We need them to understand that the first thing is it's not an add-on. It's not an afterthought, right? It needs to be embedded in every aspect. We know what the evidence says. So how do we give them that evidence that they need? Because let's be honest, if we're going to someone who is going to hold that checkbook, they're going to ask us, prove it to me, show me how it's important. Well, here's where evidence-based comes in. Shameless plug, right, for Family Engagement Solutions here, which is a website which does just that. It makes the case. So it begins with PTA, and now you have these evidence-based family engagement programs and opportunities where you can see where the work has been successful. We are in a situation now, especially post-COVID, where districts are trying to determine and prioritize what's important enough for me to spend my money on, right? So when we have someone like Vidya who talks about that excitement that a parent would have, that's anecdotal, but also it's evidence-based based on what she does, right? And what those professionals that she works with do. So I think being PTA, I'm PTA all day. That hat is never going to come off. And being a PTA leader and being on the school board has opened my eyes like I never thought possible, because now I'm at the table. So if someone comes to us and says, hey, how is this really going to help? And are we willing to fund it? Well, sure we are, because I'm on the board and I can help with that budget, right? And I say that flippantly, but it's really a genuine feeling when everyone in the district, from the curriculum department, from teaching and learning, from elementary to secondary, everyone comes in and says, how can we make our relationships with parents better? That's what we do. And I truly appreciate the opportunity to do that. And I appreciate that PTA has given me the voice to be able to do so.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to pick up on one of the things that you said a little while ago. You know, you really talked about how you always hear pushback about, oh, there's so much limited time. We don't have time to do this in our work. And so, Vidya, I want to turn it to you. You know, in a response to that, you know, time is a major barrier, and we hear this over and over again. So when you think about it in your role as a CEO of an organization that is using evidence-based work, evidence-based research, doing this work with the Family Engagement Labs Fast Talk, for example, you know, how do you help build family capacity and create stronger family school partnerships in light of the fact that time is a constraint and that we hear this pushback around we don't have the bandwidth to do this work in addition to, fill in the blank. So how do you, like, as a CEO, Vidya, like, what are your responses to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is always a challenge for anyone to think about how, we're spending time and resources, and I have a lot of empathy for that, and a lot of those considerations were driving factors in how we thought about the design of our program called Fast Talk, and so. I mean, it's no coincidence that FAST is in the name too, but it also stands for Families and Schools Talk. And the program works by sharing engaging at-home learning activities in each family's home language. And something that's really important about these activities is that they're really short, but sent on a more frequent basis, so that seeing something, that's really quick is less of it doesn't feel like, oh my God, this is going to take so much time, but this is something that as a parent, I can weave into my everyday activities. Through Fast Talk, we have significantly increased equity in academic achievement. Because of the simple and easy to do activities, they're helping parents of children in particularly in circumstances where the student may be farthest behind their peers academically. Through these home learning activities, the students catch up. And our work is grounded in this commitment to educational equity and research, technology, and practical experience in preschool through 12th grade learning. The program, how it's used by schools is, and how schools are able to do it without, on educators and educator time throughout the day and beyond the day, well into the night, as we're all aware, is the automation and the preloading and sequencing of research-based weekly tips and activities that are available in multiple languages. And so those activities are already aligned with the school's academic goals and the pacing and the timing of when the school is going to be covering certain topics. And so what we're able to do is, through this program, give parents simple, relevant, and effective strategies that are bite-sized, that they can do regularly, that cultivate mindsets, knowledge, and habits that help their children access opportunities for learning that are often perceived as out of reach for families based on their background or their linguistic background or their income or their own education levels. But by breaking them down and creating on-ramps for families, we're making it possible. So here's an example of an activity. So at snack time, give your child 10 pieces of cereal or crackers. Have them touch and count each one before eating. If they lose track, guide them to count slowly one by one. Connecting numbers to real objects helps build strong counting skills. So that's the whole thing. That's it. And you compare that with some of the communication that sometimes parents might receive. This is very short. It can fit within a text message. It's something that you could read very quickly and put into practice in any in many different types of situations. Parents also get tips on how to talk with their kids and help cultivate the mindsets that support learning. So we also send tips like counting takes practice. If your child makes a mistake, say, that's okay. Let's try again together. So really simple tips like this help encourage, the parent more, not just how to support the learning, but even how to think about what they're saying can help their child persist through difficult work and create closer bonds and relationships between the parent and child that can be very powerful and motivating for the parent. So in the studies of our program's effectiveness, students using Fast Talk were 4 times more likely to meet end-of-year kindergarten goals compared to students not in Fast Talk. Students exceeded the district average despite starting the year with the lowest kindergarten benchmark scores entering kindergarten. And we've also meaningfully advanced academic achievement, shown by statistically significant higher spring assessment scores for Fast Talk students in higher elementary grades. So this isn't just something for younger kids, but these are practices that families can employ in later grades as well. 2 of our studies were independently reviewed for evidence for ESSA, and we're really proud for Fast Talk to be included as a featured program in the National PTA's Family Engagement Solutions, and have had a lot of really great feedback from parents who 93% who receive Fast Talk tips put them into practice regularly. So we're very excited to be talking more about how our work can help parents express their high expectations, link schoolwork to current events, and foster aspirations. These are forms of engagement that are most strongly associated with student achievement. And these are things that are accessible for every parent to be able to do.
Thank you so much. That's really fantastic. I mean, of course, I love hearing about the research behind it and the findings. My own personal biases and loves in particular. So I'd like to take a couple of minutes and just ask each of you you've all shared so much incredible information, some really powerful anecdotes and descriptions of what you're doing. So can each of you just take like a minute or so and just talk about one way in which somebody from our audience who was turned on to something that you talked about or the work that you're doing, how can somebody get involved or engaged with your work? And then also like a key takeaway from what you're doing that each of us can really take back home with us. So Derek, why don't we start with you again? And just think about again, how can people get engaged with your work, and then what is one takeaway that we can really bring back to our colleagues and friends and family.
Sure. I would say one way or something that our participants can do to get involved is really looking for ways to engage with the schools within your community. So whether that's through partnerships, of course, the PTA is an opportunity, volunteering at the school, or simply attending like a school-based event. There are different things happening depending on the school and or the grade. Take the time to not only attend the event, but listen to what other families are saying as well. That gives a pulse in, we broaden our lens when we look through the experience of others and not just our own. But that speaks to the broader community because ultimately, the schoolhouse is a place that does serve the community in its entirety. So, our schools really thrive when there's deep engagement, whether it be from families, caregivers, community members, community partners. That involvement can make a real difference. And I just really want to emphasize that, that is a part of that authentic collaboration that we started the conversation with. And it's, again, not just bringing people to the table, but ensuring that everyone has a voice, not just the families, but of course the students as well, so that they too feel empowered in their education and who they are and what they can become.
Thank you very much. Penny, I'd like to turn it over to you. How do we get
Yes, sir.
involved? What should we take
Well,
away?
the easy answer is join PTA, right? I have to say that. No, but seriously, there's 20 plus years of doing this work is, she mentioned meeting people where they are. You don't just meet them where they are, you meet them as they are. Because sometimes when we get in this work, we get a couple of titles behind our names or we get invited to do things and we meet those people as they are, but then we decide that they need to be fixed or they need to be changed, right? And we need to tweak them so that they can embrace what it is that we have for them. That's where that empathy that I mentioned comes in. And also, I'm a firm believer that dissonance is a good thing, right? Because dissonance means growth. And dissonance means that you can hold yourself accountable for how you approach our families, all families. So one big takeaway, and I'll share it freely, is check your biases. You got to acknowledge that you have them because there is not a person out there that doesn't have a bias. And does that bias get in the way of the work? Right? Does it prevent you from wanting to advocate for all children? Does it prevent you from wanting to approach a certain group of families that doesn't necessarily feel welcome in the building? Right? So that's the biggest takeaway. Yes, join PTA, but also fully embrace our national partnership standards. Those standards mean a lot to local units who don't necessarily have a family engagement policy or program in the district, but it's a great way to begin, right? Because the first standard is welcome all families. That should be an easy one, right? The second one is communicate effectively. So if you can communicate with a family as they are, have those extra languages, right? Have multiple forms of communication. Don't just send an email expecting everyone to respond. Those types of things tell your parents and tell your families that you genuinely want to engage with them and that you welcome the partnerships.
Thank you. Really powerful. Appreciate that. Vidya, I'm going to let you take the final words here. How can we learn a little bit more about Fast Talk, your work? And you've given us plenty of takeaways, but if there's others, we are absorbing it all.
Yeah, I think uh, the takeaways are really powerful that have come up today. I think one for me that really resonates a lot is how important it is to listen to communities and to understand more community needs and how they relate to so many different domains of student success and support across the district, and not just sort of in a siloed off area, but really related to curriculum and core things that families are relying on the school to support. How important it is to listen to how passionate parents are about supporting their child's learning. And sometimes I think many might be surprised uh, if you're just to ask the right questions or ask questions in a different way, and invite a dialogue in a different way. To learn more about our work at Family Engagement Lab and with Fast Talk, the Fast Talk program, I think the best thing for folks to do is to come to our website, familyengagamentlab.org. Under the resources section, you'll see there's the opportunity to sign up for a family engagement learning series, which is a newsletter to learn more about the research and innovation work that we're doing in family engagement. We are building some new programs and offerings for the coming school year. So if you're interested in staying up to date on the work we're doing, that's the best way to do it.
Thank you. And thank you all for your comments, your insights. I would like to pivot a little bit and turn over to Kwesi Rollins to just share a little bit of insights and feedback based on what you've heard. Just for those who may not know, Kwesi Rollins is a member of IEL's senior leadership team. The Institute for Education Leadership is IEL. He guides IEL's portfolio programs designed to develop and support leaders, particularly those with an emphasis, or he emphasizes on family and community engagement, early childhood education, and community-based leadership development. The esteemed Kwesi Rollins, always a wonderful opportunity to say hello and hear you speak.
Thanks so much, Steve. Both illustrious and esteemed today. So I will take those as being appreciated and promotions of a sort. And thanks so much to you, Steve, for all your hard work, to PTA, and to this panel. Just lots of food for thought, lots of great things. And I won't talk long. I think kind of the elephant in the room in this moment is that there's a great deal of turmoil and uncertainty for a lot of us in the country, and certainly in these settings where we're trying to do better. And so improving collaboration and deepening our partnerships is always a good idea. But in times like this, when there's more turmoil, more uncertainty, sometimes it's more of a challenge, and yet kind of doubling down on collaboration and deepening our partnerships is one of the best ways for us to survive the times. None of us, despite all of our expertise individually or within our organizations, none of us can do it all alone. And the people who are most affected by times like this need us to really work more closely together. And I think that's what came through in our messaging. Each of us have a part to play, have a particular role in this. And we've got to continue to do more as best we can, while we also are dealing with our own feelings about uncertain times and turmoil, right? So it affects us across the board in every way. Vidya and other folks talked a lot about time and evidence. And, I think there's an expectation that we use. There's always this expectation that we use evidence-based practices, and that, and one of the things we know, and Steve, you know this well because you've helped contribute to it, there's plenty of evidence. There isn't plenty of time. And so we've got to solve that kind of puzzle of how we, and Vidya talked about this, how we provide simple tips, simple tools, how we use our creativity so that folks can access this evidence and apply it to their day-to-day. Counting snacks with kids, for example, is it's a very simple. It's evidence-based, takes best use of time, and is a kind of a win-win across the board. It was a great example. And so we've all got to kind of figure out that puzzle of there's never enough time. There's plenty of evidence, and yet we need all of us to kind of do a better job at managing our time, and making the evidence accessible to the folks that can benefit from it the most. Part of that is creativity. Part of that is expanding the table. Part of that is good listening. That's what came through in the talk today. Who's in the room? Who's consulted regularly? And not just assuming that our best thinking and the solutions that we come up with actually make sense for the folks who are most effective. We've got to make sure that we consult and partner with and listen to folks on the ground who are most affected by the day-to-day. And that's something because again, there isn't enough time, then we think, well, we don't have time to do that. And yet if we don't do that, then we come up with a lot of solutions that aren't really vetted. And somebody asked a question about how you vet stuff. Well, one of the ways you vet things is actually listening to people and talking to the folks most affected, and making sure that the solution you've come up with actually works for them and can work in partnership. So I think that's plenty for me. I encourage you guys to be of good courage, and deepen your partnerships. We all have a part to play, regardless of our entry point and our role, to collaborate a little bit more than usual. And if we all did just that, we've got a shot at surviving these times. So thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Kwesi. I think those are so important, such important ideas. And I want to raise a question that came from one of the participants in our audience. So Suzanne asked, does anyone have success in supporting, engaging our families or community members from those that are currently being targeted in the current political climate? There's fear of engaging with children. There's fear of the families are being more afraid of engaging with schools or government offices. These are the families that aren't available during regular home hours oftentimes because they're working odd shifts or just keep laying low. So do you guys have some examples of successful ways or successes in connecting with these what are now fairly vulnerable communities or communities that are feeling quite vulnerable?
So I will say that we've had, regardless of the hat right now, we've had these conversations, right? Pritchard Committee has had these conversations. PTA has had these conversations. The school district has had these conversations. And what I would like to happily say is that we're meeting them head on. The first thing we did, and we knew we were going to have, parents were going to say, can you help? What do I need to do? What am I safe to do? We started having meetings, small group meetings, to say, what are you being told? What is the fear? We know what the fears are, but we needed to hear from our parents, right? So we knew the first thing we couldn't do was we could not stop engaging. We had to uptick the engagement, right? So we just changed some of the strategies. Because we'll talk about Spanish speaking families. The district, surrounding districts, and Pritchard as well, have these programs where you advertise on social media or you advertise via the schools that these are the events that are happening. Well, they stopped doing that. And then it became word of mouth. And then they utilized us to reach out to the communities that we knew and said, hey, this is what we're having, but we're not having it at the school anymore. Here's what we're going to do, and here's where we're going to be. It just makes them be able to breathe, right? So when you also talk about other groups that feel like they aren't being heard or they're not sure, let's talk about our babies with disabilities, right? 504s and IEPs. Are we going to have a situation where we have to go into the schools and say, you better honor those IEPs and those 504s, right? Because some of us live in states where we don't necessarily feel that the state is going to back us. There are states where their state boards of education and the legislators will do what they can to protect, but everyone doesn't have that situation. So sometimes we have to take risks. As the advocates, as the voices, we are the ones who have to take the risks. And we've done so. I'm happy to say that every group that I've been associated with in the last several months has done that. So if anyone wants to talk outside of this, I'm happy to. Well, you can have my information, but there are ways to do it, and there are ways to do it safely.
Dr. Sheldon, can I piggyback on that?
Please do. Please do.
Just wanted to follow up and really reiterate some of the points that Ms. Christian just shared. And, whether it's a community school steering committee or the school's PTA, something we've talked a lot about recently is leaning into those groups to advocate on behalf of the school. Those groups can and should be inclusive of members of the community so they can play a part in spreading that message and, that whole word of mouth approach that Ms. Christian just spoke to. But additionally, the idea of a PTA and or a community school steering committee is these are voices from the community. Not just that, but they also have access and resources and supports that they can reach out to and make that connection based on the need. This is certainly a time now for that particular population of students, and the families are worried for a number of reasons. I'm speaking just from, a variety of places, but navigating that space can look different depending on where you reside and where your community lies. But leaning into those groups who are a part of the community can be great partners and guides in that process.
Thank you very much. Anybody else has it? I don't want to cut anybody off here.
Yeah, I could share perspective from the work that we've been doing with Fast Talk and supporting families that I think may especially if a school may be measuring their success or their efforts in family engagement with metrics like number of parents who are on site or coming to events, that can make at school put more emphasis on that and may feel like the strategies or the approaches may need to be very different now if families are experiencing like a lot of like the fear of being targeted. And if I see a note about long work hours and other not being available to like come on site or to be available to be in direct communication with somebody from the school. I think what I'd say to that is I think it's helpful to reframe and think about successful family engagement may not look that way. Like you may have like successful family engagement ultimately partner with families in different ways, but ultimately you wanted to show up as in better support for kids, and that may look more like a family working one-on-one with their child at home. How do we lift that up? How do we recognize a family's efforts one-on-one with their child that may not be visible directly to school is still being success at supporting and engaging families and communities? And so I think it just encouraged the schools experiencing this to take a different lens and adopt new lenses on what does success look like, because it may not be necessarily directly correlated with family being on site or present at an event, but they can be even more effective potentially one-on-one with their child.
Thank you. If I'd like to build on that and maybe throw another question at you guys, since I have the opportunity, I'm of course going to take advantage of it. So one of the things that I'm hearing is that, we need to hear back from families more. And there's always been a lot of talk about the importance of two-way communication, right? Like it's old school practice to just broadcast out. But what we need to be are better listeners in education. We need to to have more opportunities for our families where they can communicate back with us about their needs, their wants, what they're doing outside of school, again, to make the invisible more visible for educators. Have there been some tools, strategies, opportunities that people have made that really have lifted up this idea of two-way communication to really hear back from our families and communities? So educators can hear back from our families and communities and community partners. And what are some of the best strategies that you've seen or been a part of in this?
If I may, I'd like to speak to my experience in the principalship. So prior to coming to the Department of Ed, I did serve as principal here in Maryland, and something I found really effective in collaboration with our PTA is we were very intentional about creating and coordinating really social events, an opportunity for families and community members to come together without a quote unquote agenda, because the intention was to create a space where you can connect as people. Once that foundation is established, then we can talk about some of the other things or the quote unquote business items. But we had a lot of success with that because it was a space where, the expectations were just to come and have a good time. Once that relationship was established, many of those who were a part of that continued on the more formal events that were presented throughout the course of the year and more likely to engage in that way because of where we started. So I just want to put that out there to the group.
People are going to come back if they enjoy themselves. It seems so simple, but it's really so important.
And if I could piggyback on that, Fayette County Public Schools has a FACE office, Family and Community Engagement Department. And when I tell you it is stellar, it is stellar. And it maybe is biased, but our director is, she's in the trenches, and she believes in this work. And we have this entire series that goes through the entire school year, a series of events within the community at different churches, at different areas. For everyone, of course, is welcome, but she does target specific zip codes at times, and she targets specific groups. And she does that because it's usually the marginalized groups that don't feel that they can be heard in the school. And what she does is she brings in professionals. She'll bring in people from the district that you don't know necessarily that I needed to talk to. So I can meet the director of special ed, and my kid has an IEP, but I didn't know I could talk to the director of special ed. Of course, the superintendent is usually there. And what she does there is she brings in, she feeds, of course, there's always food. There are opportunities for parents to come in. Yes, you can bring your kids, but there are some where they don't bring the kids because the parents want to be able to share and have a safe space to say how they really feel about the district. And she gives you opportunities to say, this is what I don't think our district is doing well. Okay. And we're all sick of surveys. I don't like surveys. When I see them in the email, I don't, but she gets amazing feedback from those surveys saying, what's your experience like in the building? Do you feel your child is supported? Do you feel your child is seen? Do you feel your child is learning? All of these things. And it's multiple times that it's done. So you'll have it in the fall and you'll have it in the spring, and you might have one in the summer if she feels like it, but it's all designed to create data, right? It's not just to get a list of people who are complaining or from the people who aren't going to complain. It's about data, and it's about making the case for the importance of expanding what family engagement is. And that I appreciate a lot.
Thank you. That's
I'll
fantastic.
chime in on this too. I think for parents to just to feel the invitation to connect, I think grounding any engagement interaction with the families around their child, and a shared commitment to like their own child's needs is something that is so critical for families to feel like a communication or a interaction with their school is really like a priority and relevant. I think that's something like that, it just, I see a lot with, the families and the types of, feedback that we hear from families about the types of interactions and communication that they prioritize with the school is when it comes down to like, what their child's learning journey, where they are in it, and how as parents they can help them.
Thank you. So I think I'm gonna end the Q&A now because I'm afraid we're gonna go over time if we ask another question. We're in that shaky space of time here. So I'd like to transition and thank all of you for offering your insights, your wisdom, your perspectives on this. It's really been fantastic for me to have this opportunity to hear from all of you. And I'm going to turn this back over to the people who are actually in charge. Except for we can't hear you, Daniel.
Can you hear me now? There we go. All right. Well, thank you, Steve. You're definitely helpful to being in charge, as a good moderator for this conversation is. So just a big shout out and a big kudos to Dr. Steve Sheldon for being here today and moderating a wonderful and timely conversation, as was mentioned multiple times in the chat. And just a big kudos once again to our incredible panelists who are doing some wonderful work in the field, on the ground, really championing family engagement and strong family school partnerships, with collaboration being front of mind. So Derek, thank you. Vidya, thank you. Penny, of course, thank you. So thanks for being here. Again, I want to encourage everyone to stay on this webinar to connect with your colleagues and really discuss your own practices in creating collaborative family school partnerships. So after I finish closing out this panel portion of today's webinar, I will be opening up breakout rooms with a maximum of 5 attendees per room to discuss some prompt questions about today's conversation and your practices in creating collaborative family school partnerships as well. I want to remind everyone that this session was recorded, and we will be sending out a recording and the saved chat to everyone in a follow-up email. There will be an exit survey following this webinar, so please take a few minutes to fill that out so we can continue to improve our future webinar sessions. For those of you looking forward to our next conversation, our next Transforming Family School Partnerships with PTAs National Standards webinar will be on Wednesday, March 19th from 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Eastern. The focus of this session will be on leading the charge, the superintendent's role in championing family engagement, where we will hear from featured district leaders to be announced very soon about how they will use their role to drive district-wide family engagement efforts and initiatives. So everyone that registered for today's webinar has also been registered for the other webinars in the series, and we encourage you to share the registration link with your colleagues and your network, which I will place in the chat right now. So as I mentioned before, please stay on so you can continue the conversation with other attendees. We have 3 prompt questions to help jumpstart your breakout room conversations. So number 1 is, what is one key takeaway from today's session that you're excited to implement in your school or district to improve family school partnerships? Number 2 is, what strategies have you found to be effective in overcoming common barriers that families face when trying to engage with their schools? And we heard a little bit about that in the Q&A portion. So we're talking time, we're talking communication, money, transportation, all of those different barriers we hear time and time again. And then also, what resources or training would be helpful to you in enhancing family engagement efforts at your school, district, or PTA. For those of you that may not have caught all of those questions, I did just put them in the chat. Just for your reference in your breakout rooms. Everyone will be split out into those breakout rooms, again, with a maximum of 5 people in each room. We'll close the breakout rooms promptly in 20 minutes past the hour. And then for the final 10 minutes, we'll be sharing out our takeaways that you had within your breakout conversations. So please be sure to take a few notes as well. So give me just a minute to set up these breakout rooms, and then you all will be able to have conversations. All right. Breakout rooms are now open.